Now let's talk about why his spot on the Las Vegas Raiders roster might be in jeopardy after June 1st. June 1st is a key date on the NFL calendar. Teams often use it to make tough decisions on contracts, cuts, trades, and roster reshuffling. While Munford isn't necessarily a hot commodity across the league, the domino effect of moves after that deadline could open the door for him elsewhere, or shut it entirely in Las Vegas. Recently, there was some buzz suggesting Munford could be the odd man out. And honestly, that wouldn't shock most fans. It didn't shock me. He's always been one of those fringe players. Not quite a lock, not quite a long shot. Last week, Munford didn't participate in practice drills. No reason was given. But when you hear words like undisclosed, odd man out, and then factor in that this is a player who needs every rep he can get, it raises questions. Are the Raiders planning to move on from him? Or is Munford trying to avoid injury ahead of a potential release or trade? Either way, the signs are there. Let's break down the first and most obvious reason: regime change. It's a classic NFL story. A new front office wants their own guys. Munford was drafted in the 7th round back in 2022 by Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler, and both of them are gone. Since then, he's worked under 3 different head coaches and 4 different offensive line coaches. That's a brutal path for development, especially for a late-round pick. But it might also intrigue a few other teams, because Munford was once considered a possible first-rounder out of Ohio State. With the right coaching and system, some may still see untapped potential. Here's another reason this could be his final stretch with the Raiders: contract status. Munford is entering the last year of his rookie deal. If Las Vegas trades or cuts him, they save $1.1 million in cap space, about what you'd expect for a veteran minimum salary. In short, he's affordable. That makes him expendable, but also makes him appealing to teams looking for depth. If the Raiders cut or trade Thayer Munford, they'll only take on a dead cap hit of $24,265, barely a blip on the salary sheet. So financially, it wouldn't hurt them. But from Munford's perspective, the question becomes, is there a better opportunity out there? He's stuck near the bottom of the depth chart in Las Vegas. But once June 1st passes, other teams may start reshuffling their rosters. Training camps will be right around the corner. Mandatory minicamps even closer. For a player like Munford, this is the window to get into a new building, get noticed, and fight for a spot before the reps dry up. So the real question is, will Thayer Munford still be with the Raiders this season? If you're thinking about it, here's the breakdown. If I had to put money on it, I'd lean toward no. I'd say there's about an 80 to 85% chance that Munford isn't on the roster when the season kicks off. And here's why. One major factor: the Raiders made moves at offensive guard. Yes, Munford is primarily a tackle, but some evaluators, myself included, saw him as more of a guard prospect coming out of Ohio State. Earlier this offseason, the Raiders signed veteran Alex Cappa to a 2-year, $11 million contract. Realistically, it's a 1-year, $5.5 million prove-it deal, but Cappa already has connections to the front office and is expected to start at right guard. At left guard, it's shaping up to be a battle between Jordan Meredith and Dylan Parham. That leaves Munford in a tough spot. He's not beating out Colton Miller at left tackle. He's not supplanting DJ Glaze at right tackle, especially not after the team used draft capital on Glaze. Even if Munford is marginally better than a couple of this year's rookies, that might not be enough. The Raiders invested in Caleb Rogers and Charles Grant during the draft. Rogers is versatile. He can play anywhere across the offensive line. Grant is a raw but intriguing swing tackle, and both were handpicked by the current regime. That's the key. Munford wasn't. He's a holdover, a 7th-round pick from the last regime, now 25 years old, and entering the final year of his rookie deal. From a front office perspective, the decision is clear. Do you invest in a soon-to-be free agent you didn't draft, or in 2 young prospects you just brought in? That answer is obvious, and it doesn't favor Munford. So with players like Parham, Cappa, Meredith, Rogers, and Grant in the mix, Munford's chances of sticking around look slim. If he's paying attention, and you know he is, the writing's on the wall. Let's keep this conversation moving, because the writing on the wall for Thayer Munford is becoming even clearer. At this point, it's obvious he's being left behind. Any athlete at some point has to confront reality. And for Munford, that reality may be setting in. Maybe he's not a long-term fit for this Raiders team. That doesn't mean his NFL career is over. But in Las Vegas, The window is closing fast. The team's actions speak volumes. The Raiders passed on high-profile offensive tackle prospects like Kelvin Banks and Armin Mbunde in the draft, signaling just how much confidence they have in DJ Glaze as their right tackle of the future. Glaze is just 22, with traits the coaching staff clearly believes in. That belief pushes Munford further down the depth chart. Then there's Dalton Wagner, another right tackle prospect who's been getting reps at OTAs. Wagner is older than Munford, at 26, but he's well-liked in the locker room and has been more active in the offseason program. Right now, if it's a choice between Munford and Wagner, the edge goes to Wagner. The Raiders are also working on developing Charles Grant on the left side, which leaves Munford boxed in. He's mostly played on the right, and if both tackle spots are occupied by younger, more favored prospects, where exactly does he fit? And there's one more name to keep in mind. Lachlan Lockie Tosi, the team's international pathway program player. Tosi's being used as an extra offensive lineman in jumbo packages, the kind of role Munford used to fill. On paper, it might be listed as a tight end, but it's really just a sixth lineman. The point? Even in specialty packages, the Raiders already have someone in place to replace Munford. Tosi has taken over that spot, and that's another knock against Munford's value on this roster. So when you stack it all up, the depth chart, the roster additions, the team's draft choices, and the changing roles, the message is clear. Whether he's cut or asks to be released, Munford's time with the Raiders looks like it's coming to an end. So, what's more likely, a trade or a cut? If we're talking percentages, there's a strong lean in one direction. At this point, there's about an 80% chance Thayer Munford gets cut, and only a 20% chance he's traded. But let's break down both possibilities, starting with why a trade, while unlikely, isn't completely off the table. Despite Munford being on the roster bubble, there's still a bit of value in what he's shown over his first 2 seasons. In 2023, Munford logged 521 offensive snaps and finished with a 74.1 overall PFF grade, a noticeable improvement from his rookie year. He allowed 4 sacks, committed only 1 penalty, and played primarily at right tackle, occasionally filling in on the left side as well. That performance showed he was far more comfortable under former offensive line coach Carmen Brisillo, who helped develop Munford's fundamentals and technique. Go back to his rookie season in 2022, and he still held up well in limited reps. 369 snaps, a 63.2 overall grade, 1 sack allowed, and 4 penalties. For a 7th-round pick, that's a respectable starting point. There was real developmental progress. That's the kind of growth a few NFL teams might be willing to take a chance on, especially if they're familiar with Munford or his coaching history. Which brings us to possible trade destinations. Potential trade fits for Thayer Munford, New England Patriots. Josh McDaniels is back in the building and was part of the regime that drafted Munford in 2022. Tennessee Titans. Dave Ziegler now works in the Titans front office. Like McDaniels, he played a role in drafting Munford. New York Giants. Carmen Brisillo is now the Giants' offensive line coach. Under him, Munford played the best football of his career. Arizona Cardinals. Munford's former Ohio State offensive line coach now works in Arizona. That familiarity could help. Baltimore Ravens, Seattle Seahawks, Houston Texans, Indianapolis Colts. The last 4 teams all have a need for depth at offensive tackle or interior versatility. If a coach or scout in those buildings sees Munford as a low-risk flyer, the Raiders could get a late-round pick in return or potentially a player-for-player swap. Still, the odds point more toward a cut. The Raiders have a crowded offensive line room, a new front office, and younger players they've recently drafted who are eating up the remaining developmental reps. Even with his modest cap number, the team may see more long-term value in clearing the roster spot. Let's be realistic. If a trade for Thayer Munford happens, it's not going to bring back much. At best, the Raiders might pull off a late-round pick swap. That could mean sending Munford and a 7th-rounder in exchange for a 6th. Or it could just be a straight-up 7th. Anything more is unlikely, but even that scenario feels like a long shot. The most probable outcome is still that Munford gets cut or possibly requests his release. His 2024 performance simply didn't do him any favors. He played just 201 snaps, posted a PFF grade of 45.9, allowed 10 pressures and 5 sacks. In every measurable way, he was the Raiders' worst offensive lineman last season, and it wasn't close. Health was part of the issue. Munford clearly wasn't playing at 100%, But just as important, he was a poor fit in James Craig's offensive line system. That transition hurt his effectiveness, and he never quite found his footing. Still, there are a few redeeming qualities to keep in mind. Munford has versatility. He's played both left and right tackle, and he even lined up as a sixth offensive lineman in jumbo sets, where PFF labels him as a tight end for formation purposes. He also has some collegiate experience at guard, and that might be his best chance to stick in the NFL moving forward. If there's any future path for Munford in the league, it's probably on the interior. His size and limited foot speed made him vulnerable to speed rushers off the edge, but he could potentially find new life as a depth piece at guard, particularly for a team looking to build interior depth with a low-cost, low-risk player who has starting experience. Bottom line, whether it's a quiet cut or a depth trade, the signs are clear. Thayer Munford's time with the Raiders is almost certainly coming to an end.